Hi, this is Andy, host of podcast, Master of General Knowledge. Thanks for joining me today. I think we're going to take our discussion back to RVs. It's a topic we cover quite a bit, and as many of you might already know, I manufacture a repair product used in the RV industry, kind of a niche item. So I'm fairly well versed in that area. And you'll also recall that we've done some general information podcasts on caulks and sealants and adhesives and things. So we're going to step back into the caulk and sealant thing, and we're going to talk specifically about caulking and sealing RVs. The background of this is we have two types of caulks and sealants. We have reactive chemistry caulks and sealants. Silicone reacts with moisture to cure into a vulcanized rubber type material. The same with urethanes. One part out of the tube, yet the urethane reacts with moisture on the surface and goes through a curing process. And these are opposed in opposition of solvent-based sealants. Those are sealants that have water content or other aromatic solvent like toluene or xylene in them, benzene and so forth. And as those products go through a drying process, you extrude them out of the tube as a paste, and they harden or get firm through the drying process, the evaporation of solvents or moistures from out of them. If you recall, the higher performing products are the reactive chemistries, silicones and urethanes. Better, environmental resistance. I think they last longer. I think they bond better adhesion. With the exception of solvent-based products, the solvent actually acts a bit like a primer or a cleaner and will help you adhere to a dirty or contaminated surface. I mean, that's one of their benefits. They're typically less expensive than the reactive things, but that's why we see them used so much in the industry, specifically the RV industry. But they also shrink and crack over relatively short time, couple of years, and that in a 20 or 30 year lifetime of an object is a short span. So that's the two different sealants we're going to be discussing. More specifically, what is going on with motorhomes, travel trailers, RVs in general, that we see a lot of moisture damage or water damage, delamination of the siding, intrusion on the interior, leaks in the roofs. What's going on here? Well, my experience, and I'm always talking from an opinion point here. This is a general knowledge discussion, not extremely specific. But a lot of these RVs, there's a lot of hand assembly going on. And if you recall in our discussion on the types of different coaches, the drivetrain and the chassis are generally manufactured in an automotive style factory and are fairly robust and delivered to the RV dealer as a chassis and drivetrain combination. And the RV, not the RV dealer, but the RV manufacturer builds the body around it. It's a stick framed thing. It may be aluminum framing. That's a big plus, but a lot of it's wood framed stick with cut wood and glued and screwed together. The walls are a composite structure, so they build a wall with an interior paneling glued to a framework, either aluminum or wood square stock. That's usually filled with a styrofoam insulation. And then on the outside of the framing is Luan plywood, which is the big problem area. There's another product called Asdel, a manufactured product that seems to be a better solution. But people are still using Luan plywood, and hundreds of thousands of units, probably millions and millions have this plywood in there. And on the outside of the plywood is fiberglass skin, Filon being a brand name, Filon. And so this whole assembly is glued together and pressed together with a variety of different adhesives. Now I think hot melt glue is one of the top ones. That used to be solvent-based contact cement and epoxies, different things. But they glue this like a unitized wall. And the issue is the wall is very waterproof when you have a continuous sheet of fiberglass that's 40 feet long by 8.5 feet tall. it's a pretty solid, it's a single unit of fiberglass bonded to the outside. The issue becomes when you take, 4 or 5 or 6 of these things and start screwing them together. Now you have joints at the top, at the right angle of the roof and the wall, and the back cap and the front cap. And those are all, have to be sealed and bonded to prevent moisture from getting in that mechanical joint. To make matters even more complicated, we go ahead and we cut a bunch of holes for windows and doors and hatches and access points. And now that fiberglass continuous sheet has been, compromised. And overall, I think you can have 300 or 400 lineal feet of joint that needs to be sealed and caulked. Right out of the get-go, if you're buying a new RV or motorhome or travel trailer, you need to inspect it 100% on all caulk joints and lines around all windows and doors. We have seen cases where brand new coaches have obvious potential leak paths, large, caulk and sealant missing, fasteners missing on clamp rings. The windows are held into the RV via a clamp ring that's on the inside. And the ring on the inside is screwed to the window frame on the outside and basically squeezes the window component, the trim ring on the inside, and the window frame on the outside squeezes it against to the wall. And they use butyl tape, which is like a putty tape. And the compression of the putty tape is what makes the seal. But that requires, a fair amount of overlap of the window frame onto the siding. Maybe, 3/8 of an inch would be a minimum. Many times we see where the window is not centered in the opening correctly, so it's a 1/16 of an inch on one edge and maybe an inch on the other, or the opening is just too large and you don't get good sealing. We also see cases where they break off the screws in the trim ring when they're assembling it, and you won't get even clamp force. If the screw breaks, you need to have consistent, accurate clamping all the way around the window. So, first part of this conversation is when you look at a brand new RV, you need to inspect the sealants around the windows and doors. Look for any gaps, missing sealant, any signs of open areas where water could get into these inside that wall. As far as used units or the unit you're in now, you need to caulk and seal it every year. Your owner's manual probably says to caulk and seal every 6 months. And in fact, your insurance policy requires you to do maintenance on the vehicle to prevent water damage. Another part of our business, we see tremendous amounts of insurance claims being denied for water damage because it's a maintenance issue. And I have to agree with it, because you have to caulk and seal this thing, consistently, yearly, annually. And then you can keep the water out of it. Let's talk about specific areas on the coach of where to seal and how to seal. The roof is the first place to look, and the perimeter of the roof, where the walls meet the roof, is a reasonable place to start. Most of those joints seem to hold up fairly well, with the exception of where an awning rail is mounted, or drip caps and things like that. But that's usually fairly robust because they use a reasonably good trim piece that goes over the top of it. On top of the roof, you've got an air conditioner, an antenna, a ladder mount, vents, and all these areas are prone to leaking. The good thing about those things is those areas in the caulks and sealants is that they use a self-leveling or semi-self-leveling flowable material. So it's a larger coverage over the joint of the flange of the roof vent. But you can go up and take a look and inspect each one of those, looking for caulking or sealing that's lifting up or coming loose, or doesn't seem to have adequate coverage over the flanges, because all these vents and things have a physical flange mounted to the roof, and that's what you're caulking and sealing over. There's also sealant under the flange, hopefully. A problem area that we see typically is the horizontal seams in the roof, mostly at the front cap. A Class A has a front cap that's flat nose, but it usually is a pre-molded fiberglass piece that's mounted to the RV. And across the roof line, you have a joint. And that joint can flex and move, and we see that coming loose. The same with Class C's where the nose wraps around. So that horizontal or that cross joint is critical. That probably has to be looked at really closely. Moving on to the sides of the RV, windows are notorious areas for leaks. We see the delamination, the bubbling starting below windows because the windows, many times, as I said earlier, don't fit the rough opening correctly. You don't have enough sealing surface between the window frame and the siding. And it doesn't take much. An 1/8 of an inch of overlap of caulk is not going to do it. We typically, caulk around the windows besides the butyl tape that's behind the window frame, which is typically what they use. And they use butyl tape on boats and hatches, and it lasts years and years. But the width of the overlap of the flange to the surface is critical. Again, 1/8 of an inch, even 1/4 of an inch is not going to do it. The butyl tape is 3/4 to an inch wide. It wants all of that sealant, pressed in there. Many times you have to take the window out. The only way to reseal a window is take it out. So then you have the hatches. Same thing as a window. The hatches are around there. They seem to be a little more robust. I think you get flexing around the windows also while driving. In the belt line, there's a lot of times a horizontal strip running along the side of the coach. But all these areas that have some sort of thing that's been cut into the wall or the roof, has to be looked at very close and has to be caulked. And caulking, let's talk about the process of caulking. It's generally not a 2-hour job. It's generally a day or two, and it might even require to remove windows and hatch frames and things like that. Excuse me. Not unusual to have to scrape the caulk off and really work at it. And then washing and cleaning, solvent washing the areas. So obviously, if you do a really good job once and you stay on top of it, it's going to be much easier progressively going forward. But the first time might be pretty major. And that first time is coming right out of the gate. You have to, again, inspect the vehicle before you take possession of it. And I mean inspect it. Spend a half an hour examining every seam, seal, every trim ring around the window, every vent, open and close them. Make sure that there's no exposed wood or exposed, side framing and stuff like that, which we see an awful lot of. In a nutshell, caulking and sealing will keep your coach watertight. Urethanes and silicones are better. Urethanes are the most durable, in my opinion, but they tend to be dull and might collect dirt and get dingy after a while. Silicones look great, very pretty, very shiny, but they do tend to peel when they're pushed into a thin film along the, like when you tool it with your finger. The silicones like to be encapsulated in a groove, but still a good potential use. And then butyl tape is a viable material as long as it's used and installed properly. So that's really the lowdown on the caulking and sealing on an RV. It's a serious and major maintenance consideration when you go into owning one of these vehicles. That's the short of it. Please send us your comments, your questions. We can always take this a little further and revisit it. But thank you for joining me. Andy Newton, host of Master of General Knowledge podcast. Visit us at www.masterofknowledge.com. Thanks.